Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And it is finally decision time for us in this 2036 to 2037 offseason. The Buffalo Wings are coming off of our second World Championship, and we have made one big decision thus far to offer. Well, we made several decisions to offer most of our arbitration eligible players, actually all of our arbitration eligible players, contracts. But we've decided to try to bring back franchise icon Deshaun Seifu on a $25 million a year contract for 5 years. He was looking for more money a year and more years. We've actually turned it into a 3-year contract with a 2-year option on it, because we have a team option after the 3rd season, but then he does have a player option he insisted on after the 4th season. But if he does go in a really bad direction, we can get out after 3 years. I don't think, even though he's a speed-focused player, he'll deteriorate that quickly, but we do have a little bit of insurance in this contract if we end up needing it. And with that and some other kind of minor moves we've made just to get guys making a little bit of money off of our 40-man roster, we've got about $20 million to spend now. And I appreciate all of the thoughts from viewers over the past several days about who we should bring back, who we shouldn't bring back. And as I said, it's decision time now, and I have made a big decision. And I know this is one that some of you are going to disagree with, and I really understand the reasons for your disagreement, but we are not going to try to make an offer to Shamar Jenneret. He's looking for almost $40 million a year for 7 years. We probably could get him down to a 6-year deal for $37, $38 million a year. But given that we've only got $20 million to spend right now, it's going to require us to really make a ton of other moves, and it probably guarantees that we won't be able to next year afford our ace pitcher, Barajas. And I think that the young Barajas is more important to bring back. I don't think we're going to replace Jenneret. He's led the league in ribbies all 3 years he's been with us, won 2 World Series MVP awards and won a regular MVP award in the National League in 2035. And we were a perennial playoff team that couldn't get past the NLCS till he joined us. And as I talked about, we've won 2 World Series since he's joined us, and he was the MVP of both of them. So we're clearly not going to replace his bat. But given the financial situation that we're in, to be able to clear another 20-ish million or so of payroll, we were either going to have to pull scouting and player development down significantly. Given that we've got the number 4 farm system in baseball, I want to kind of keep the pipeline of good young talent coming. And then the other option was to trade somebody away. And the most popular candidates to trade away from viewers in the comments are probably Bobby Bolig and Mike Heine. We'll talk about both of them and why I'm not going to try to trade them away. Heine is not making a ton of money yet. We signed him to a long contract before he had ever played a major league game for us, after he was a first-round draft pick in 2032 out of Bradley. So he's not making huge money yet. He has regressed a bit the last 2 seasons, but he's still been an above-average player. And importantly, he's one of the few left-handed bats we have in the lineup. He's much better in terms of his rating against right-handed pitching than left-handed pitching. And when we look at his 124 career WRC plus, it's a 134 against right-handed pitching. So with all of the young right-handed batters we have coming up through our farm system, I think we can probably get him into more of a platoon role than he's been historically. Have him starting 125, 130 games and sitting against left-handed pitching, which hopefully will help his WRC plus get better. But we also don't get a ton of salary relief by moving on from him. And we're not going to trade Juan Estrada, even though he would clear a lot of salary for us. He's a two-way player that hit 345 for us this year as a left-handed hitter. Steve Anderson is a platoon at shortstop for us. Heine, we just talked about, probably will be in a platoon next year with one of the young right-handed hitters who will be replacing Jenneret. We're moving on from James Wood. Alejandro Mercado is not a big-time bat, and he's unlikely to make the roster. So with Estrada, Heine, Anderson, and Bolig, we've really only got 4 left-handed bats on the team. And that's why, even though we could free up more money next year, $15 million by trading Bolig, kind of close enough to get us into the neighborhood of what we would need to bring back Jenneret. Bolig is similar to Heine in that he's got a 127 career WRC plus, a 123 for us. But when you look at his stats against right-handed pitching, he's got a 130 with us and a 135 for his career. So he's another guy who is clearly more effective against right-handed pitching than he is against left-handed pitching. And with all of the right-handed bats that we have coming up, feel like he can probably have a bounce-back year for us. He is a guy we've typically tried to only play against left-handed pitching, or more accurately, only start against left-handed pitching. But even coming off of an off year, he's still at a 120 WRC plus for us. And I just feel like moving on from Bolig or Heine pulls probably our 2 most important left-handed bats, certainly the 2 most powerful left-handed bats we have, out of the lineup and off of the roster entirely. And when we look at the upcoming free agents, Colton Sims is probably the most interesting left-handed hitter at this point. Very good contact, excellent home run power, and a good eye. But he's 33 years old, and he's looking to make over $30 million next year. If we cut a Bolig to bring back Jenneret, we're going to need to add another big left-handed bat, and we wouldn't be able to afford Colton Sims anyways with all the money that we're paying for Jenneret, or that we would be paying for Jenneret. So I know that we don't have a good replacement for Jenneret. You can't replace a player like that. We're going to give Joe Gallagher, the youngster, a chance to be in the lineup pretty regularly. We've still got Joe Edwards back, who's not really even a young right-handed hitter anymore, and he's finally going to be making more than the major league minimum next year. And then we've also got Arturo Flores, and I don't think any of these guys are Jenneret, but we've got young, cheap, right-handed power hitters who, with the exception of Edwards, really don't have a position to play that we'd love to slot into that DH role that Jenneret has had for us. And as I talked about, even though we can fit Jenneret in this year, if we bring him back and we also bring back Seifu, we're just going to have no money for extensions next year, when we're probably going to need to be looking for $25-30 million to ensure that Alexis Barajas is back with us next year. So that's why we are not making an offer to Generat. We have, as I touched on earlier, we have made offers to every one of our arbitration eligible players. We've got the big offer out to Seifu. We've decided not to make an offer to Cameron Johnson, the left-handed pitcher who joined us this year. Just kind of felt like Matthew Wenzel, who's been with us a few years, is a little younger, going to be a little cheaper. And although his movement isn't great, at least he has decent control. And he's definitely more effective against lefties than he is against righties. To me, Johnson, with the below average movement and control, just has a profile that I don't love for a reliever, where he's going to end up walking a decent amount of batters and likely giving up a decent number of home runs. To be fair, he only gave up 1 in 26 innings pitched with us, but he did walk 16 batters in those 26 innings. And you can see over the last 3 years in the majors with the Dodgers, the Angels, and the Yankees, he has given up an awful lot of home runs. So a reliever coming into clutch situations who doesn't always get the ball over the plate. And sometimes when he does get the ball over the plate, he grooves one that gets hit 450 feet. Makes me feel like we're not going to try to bring him back next year. So with the 20-ish million we have to spend and the decision that we've made to not pursue Generat, the last decision we really have is what to do with Jorge Carrillo, the 30-year-old starter who's headed to free agency. He is looking for 6 years at about $15.5 million a year. I have thought about submitting a QO to him to ensure that if we lose him, we get a draft pick. And if he hits the bid, almost $19 million next year is high for him, but we can fit it under the budget. We're obviously not going to be big players in free agency, but it does ensure that we bring back our entire 5-man rotation from this past season, and we've also got the ability to potentially add in the youngster Mendoza into the mix. So I'm considering giving Carrillo an offer as far as the qualifying offer. But I'm also considering just making an actual contract offer to Carrillo to try to lock him up. And it's not going to be easy for us to afford because we've already got Shazier and Estrada signed for the medium to long term. We want to get Barajas signed. So if we are paying $15.5 million to Carrillo, that's going to give us 4 starters who admittedly are good starters to great starters, but they're also making real big money. But I feel like with the departure of Generat, we've got to really maybe pivot and try to keep our pitching staff as together and as dominant as possible. And I do think that if we move on from a pitcher in the coming years, it may be Isidro Ochoa. He is making the major league minimum next year, but he's a guy who's going to start making a little bit of money. But particularly if we sign Carrillo to a longer-term deal, Ochoa will be a guy that we move on from when he's ultimately free agent eligible in a few years. But a top 4 of Barajas, Carrillo, Shazier, and Estrada would still be real good. And as I've talked about, we've also got Mendoza in the farm system. So my thought is losing Jenneret, we maybe try to bring Carrillo back, keep the rotation as strong as possible for next season. And then if we have to end up trading away a Carrillo, a Shazier, maybe an Estrada, but I don't think that's the direction we'd go. I think either Shazier or Carrillo would not be signed to oppressive contracts that we wouldn't be able to get out from. We might not get as much back in return as we'd hope, but I think we'd be able to get out of one of those contracts if we needed to, unless those guys just suffer a major injury that really blows up their career, which certainly not hoping for. And as I think about Carrillo, I acknowledge that his ratings don't jump off as incredibly awesome, but he does have a 5-pitch arsenal. He's an Iron Man as far as his injury proneness. He's popular in the locker room. He throws in the high 90s. And he's been a well above average pitcher over the course of his career. So I don't want to be spending $15.5 million a year on him. And I don't even know that I want to give him the 6 years that he's looking for. But I'm willing to throw out a less attractive offer to him than what he's looking for, and at least see if maybe we can get him on a deal that's a little front loaded to this season, when we're not, this upcoming season where we're not going to be big players in free agency, and then maybe gives us a couple years after that where he's making less money that will fit better within our budget, and or also make it even easier for us to move on from him in trade potentially if we need to. So Carrillo, as we've talked about, looking for $15.5 million over 6 years with a player option in the final season. We're offering him 5 years with a team option in the final season is an average of just $13 million, so 2.5 less than he's looking for. It is very front loaded for this upcoming season. As I've said, I don't think if we sign him, there's really much of anything for us to pursue in free agency. The guys who would be difference makers for us, we just can't afford, and we don't really have a ton of holes to fill that I don't think we can. I think we can fill the tiny holes that we have to fill through the Rule 5, through bargain basement free agency, and through our minor league system. I think this is probably a little bit too low for him to think about it, but it's a decent starting point from my perspective. Yeah, he's only come down a little bit. He wants 6 years, and he still wants $15.3 million. So I might try to offer him a little bit more attractive contract, but I'm not going to go crazy with him. I'd love to have him back and under our control for a few more years at our number. But if I can't get him, I think I'm going to make the QO to him, which we can't afford for next season if he does happen to accept it. And if he doesn't accept the QO, at least we'll get some compensation if he moves on. So I feel like we made some concessions here. We've increased the annual value by $1 million to 14 from 13. We've also given him the 6th year that he wants, although it is a team option and it's a bigger number in that final season. So presumably if he's still with us, it's not an option that we would be likely to exercise at his age 36 season. We'll see what he thinks about it. Yeah, he wants 15. He really hasn't come down at all. And he's insistent on that player option. Might try to do what we did with Jenneret, or not Jenneret. I'm not offering Jenneret, but we did with Seifu, and keeping in the player option for the final year of the season, but seeing if we can throw in a team option the year before. And we are up to an average of $15 million in 6 years. It's the structure that I said, with a team option in year 5 and a player option in year 6, presumably at $18 million when he's 35 years old. We decline that option, so it's really not as close to the 15.33 million a year over 6 years that he's looking for. Realistically, it's a $54 million deal over 4 years, so that's still $13.5 million a year for those 4 years, and then there are those options at the end that theoretically we might exercise and theoretically he might exercise. I don't think he'll go for this, and if he doesn't, I think we just give him the QO and let him hit free agency. Yeah, he really doesn't want that team option in there, and the money he's looking for isn't all that much more than we were willing to give him. But I don't like the idea of a player option for him in his mid-30s. I think we tried. If he hits free agency, there's always a chance that we could try to bring him back. But it's not the worst thing to be going into free agency with some options. So we are going to give him the QO. At the very least, if he accepts it, we got him back for the kind of money I was willing to pay him next year anyways. Now we don't have the long-term contract with him, but it does kind of let us see another card, so to speak, when he's 31 years old next year. If he pitches the way he has the last few years, when he's been one of the top winners in the National League with 52 wins over these last 3 seasons, maybe we make him another offer then, but then that also lets us see what happens with Mendoza. Let's see what happen with Estrada. So I don't think I mind either way. If Carrillo accepts the qualifying offer, we kind of spend most of our money that's available on him for next year without making a long-term commitment, and we bring back an excellent pitching rotation. And if he declines the offer, then we still can potentially negotiate with him in free agency. And if he ends up signing somewhere else, which he probably would when he got to free agency, at least we'll get some draft pick compensation. So I think we're done negotiating with Carrillo for the time being. So it's just a matter of hopefully getting all of the arbitration eligible players signed, finding what goes on with Seifu and that big contract offer we've made to him, and then we've made a lot of offers to a lot of our minor league free agents as well. And we've started to get our players signed. Catcher Walt Miller Edwards is back with the arbitration offer we've made to him. And most importantly, Deshaun Seifu going to be back with us for at least the next 3 seasons. The fans ecstatic to have him on board. Barajas signed the arbitration offer we made to him. Clearly want to think about what we're going to do long term with him over the next year. Andres Medina will be back with us. Elvin Jimenez, Pat Mims, another one popular with the fans, as is Lorne Walborn. Yohane Varejo. We're trying to get some of the coaches we need signed as well. But most importantly, Deshaun Seifu will be back for at least another 3 seasons with us. $25 million a year each of the next 3 years, and then the team option when he hits his mid-30s. Certainly would expect that over the next 3 years he should continue to climb closer towards 3,000 career hits and climb closer towards 1,000 career steals as well. So will be interesting to see what Seifu can continue to do for us on his way to a potential trip to Cooperstown, hopefully. And we've been making some progress over the last several days. As far as our coaching staff, we're just trying to get one final hitting coach for our DSL team. Otherwise, we've got a fully staffed minor league system. We've signed all our arbitration eligible players. Obviously, have the big signing of Mr. Seifu. So the only interesting thing that's going to be left for us is whether or not Carrillo accepts our QO or not. But we're also heading into award season. We didn't win any Gold Gloves or the Mariano Rivera Award. I would think we're going to have at least one and hopefully at least two Silver Sluggers. I can't imagine that Jenneret won't win one, and I would hope that Seifu would get one for his excellent year as well, even though he doesn't have a lot of home run power. And supposedly the hitting coach that we've made an offer to allegedly likes the offer we've made. Let's see how the Silver Sluggers turned out. So Deshaun Seifu did get it one, and Shamar Jenneret did get one. So no real surprises there. The two guys that we thought were very strong competitors for Silver Sluggers both won them. For Jenneret, third straight year with a Silver Slugger for us will be his final Silver Slugger for us, but adds to the massive amounts of hardware that he has won in the 3 seasons that he's been with us. Colton Sims, the guy who we were talking about, who is headed to free agency, won the Gold Glove at third base. Seifu back to second base this year, just won the third Gold Glove of his career, or third Silver Slugger of his career, 2031, 2034, and then now in 2036. So nice season from him, and nice to see a guy with only 6 home runs still get recognized for the fact that he led the National League in hits and doubles while batting over 300 with 13 triples. So certainly had an excellent season with the bat. Don't think he's going to win an MVP award this year. I think that's going to go to the catcher for Philadelphia most likely. But nice to see Seifu still getting a bit more hardware in his trophy case. And our manager, Alan Bowles, just was honored as the National League's best manager. You may remember that before this past season, I switched from GM/manager to GM only, back to the way I typically like to play this game. So Bowles gets the Manager of the Year award. And now we are just waiting on Cy Young and MVP. I think we will have some players getting significant votes for both awards, but don't expect that we will win either of them. And I was wrong about the National League Cy Young Award. Our guy, Alexis Barajas, 25 first place votes, wins the award. He was the only Buffalo Wing who got votes. Didn't know that our ace was going to get it. Felt like with the 2.39 ERA, he'd be a strong candidate. But didn't lead the league in wins, didn't lead the league in strikeouts, didn't lead the league in pitcher WAR. Thought it might end up going to somebody else. But Barajas, the first Cy Young award of his career, we do have him signed next year at $20.7 million, his final arbitration eligible season. Getting him locked up for the long term now is going to be our primary goal over the next 12 months. Hopefully we'll be able to get something in place before he hits free agency next year. Pierce George of the Cardinals is the only other guy who got first place votes. He's a guy who, looking at the numbers, would have thought that he might win it. Led the league in wins, innings pitched, strikeouts, whip, strikeout to walk ratio, quality start percentage, and pitcher WAR. So with that huge season from Pierce George, and he is already a 3-time Cy Young Award winner. A little surprised that Barajas beat him, but I'll take it. And interestingly, Drake Purvis, who was one of the key guys we sent to Miami in the trade that brought us Barajas, finished third in the Cy Young voting this year after going 14-7 with a 2.51 ERA. So we've got the first Cy Young Award winner for Buffalo of this playthrough. Before we move on to the MVP awards tomorrow, we'll just take a quick look in at who won the Cy Young Award in the American League. And you can tell it's been a while since I've pulled those up. It's always a Seattle pitcher. Seattle has such a good pitching rotation. Looks like Chris Lenig won it this year. 29-year-old. That is his third consecutive Cy Young Award. Led the AL with a 19-8 record. Also at a 2.51 ERA. 75% of his games were quality starts. So an excellent season from Lenig. But to my point about the Seattle Mariners, 6 pitchers in the American League received votes for the Cy Young Award, and 4 of them were Mariners. Jesus Espetia, who is also a 3-time Cy Young Award winner, and between Espetia, who won it 3 years in a row, and now Lenig, who has won it 3 years in a row, that's 6 consecutive Cy Youngs for Seattle. Angelo Salazar, 26-year-old who went 17-10, also received some votes. And then Mike Moore, a guy who we hoped to pick with the 23rd pick in the draft 5 years ago, and he went the pick before us, 15-7 with a 2.99 ERA, All-Star for the second time, also received some votes for the American League Cy Young Awards. So we were perhaps fortunate that Seattle got picked off before we had to play them in the World Series this year. Would have been real interesting to go against that high-powered pitching staff in a World Series. Maybe it'll happen next year. And turning to the MVP awards in the American League, Max Ziger of the A's, 25-year-old second baseman, monster season, led the league in runs, hits, and home runs, 7 WAR. Looks like he's a pretty solid second baseman. Not great, but certainly a fine defensive second baseman who had a pretty big offensive season at the age of 25. And that gives him back-to-back MVPs in the American League. National League, it's exactly who I expected. The catcher, Luis Ortega of the Phillies, 25-year-old, led the National League in on-base percentage, slugging, OPS, WRC+, and WAR. Good defensive catcher who also hit almost 300 with 39 homers and 108 ribbies. That is a guy that's going to be tough to beat in the voting. Max Clark from Pittsburgh finished second. We did have multiple players getting votes. Deshaun Seifu finished 5th in the voting. Shamar Jenneret 6th. Our Cy Young Award winning Alexis Barajas finished, if I could count, 8th in the voting, and he was the one who got the actual other 2 first place votes, interestingly, so they were very impressed with his performance overall. Our two-way guy, Juan Estrada, also got some votes as well. So as expected, a lot of votes for the Buffalo Wings for National League MVP this year. But not surprisingly, the catcher, Ortega of the Phillies, ends up winning the award. And as we approach free agency, Jorge Carrillo rejected our qualifying offer, so glad that we at least made it to him. Looks like we'll be moving on from Carrillo, which will give us some money to spend this coming off-season. And it still could end up being spent on Carrillo, but if he ends up going somewhere else, we'll at least get some draft pick compensation for him. And we've made it to the beginning of free agency. We'll take a quick look at the top international free agents and then the top free agents overall. Quick look just based on the star ratings as to whether there's anyone interesting. Nobuyuki Matsuda out of Japan, 29-year-old, certainly looks like an interesting starting pitcher. Looking for about $20 million a year. We don't know a ton about him. We'll certainly request a scouting report on him. Probably not a guy that we would make a huge long-term commitment to, but he's on the borderline of what we could afford. Inahiro Miyake, left-handed reliever, durable, not looking for a ton of money, not an incredible looking profile, but again, we don't know a ton about him, so we'll request a scouting report on Miyake as well. Vicente Namora looks like he's already signed with the Nashville Stars, so he's not available. And then, so we'll scout a couple of those guys who look like they might be interesting guys to think about for our pitching staff. Taking a look at the top pitchers available, Chris Staten, as we knew, our former closer, one of the big guys who's available. When we think about the starting pitchers who are available, certainly a less impressive crew. Got some people looking for big money with Pacheco and Urena. Carrillo says he's only looking for 14.7 million now, so even a little less than we thought he was looking for. Let's see what he has to say to us. Yeah, 14.7 million a year. He is looking for 7 years. We could potentially re-engage with him. I think we're going to want to structure it the way that we want to, though. Don't necessarily want to make a long-term commitment to him, but for 5 to 10 million less than Urena and Pacheco are looking for, could certainly consider bringing him back. If we want to go for a bargain guy, Eddie Mosley is wrecked physically, but doesn't look like a horrible fifth starter, quite honestly. Another left-hander. We could even end up using him in a bullpen role where we could use a lefty. I'm mildly intrigued by wild card Mosley. Again, he's wrecked physically, but he's been a bit above average over the course of his career. Still has pretty good stamina and is decent at holding runners. Not a bad personality. And he's really not looking for much money at all. He's not an unintriguing option to me among these pitchers, because we could use kind of a swing man who could start for us, and we could use another left-handed pitcher in the bullpen or in the rotation. So he's a bit intriguing to me at first glance. Taking a look at the batters who are available, Jenneret, Cruz, Sims, Jerry Miller, and Joey Moore are the big guys that are out there, and they're all looking for big-time money. Mr. Jenneret, $41.5 million a year, so he was actually willing to give us a little bit of a hometown discount to stay when we were talking to him. Colton Sims, who, as I mentioned, is the best left-handed bat that's available, looking for about $34 million a year over 6 years. I'd mentioned at the start of the episode we were moving on from Jenneret, but with the fact that we didn't sign Carrillo, we're kind of in a situation where every option is still kind of open. Clearly, we would need to make some moves to dump some salary and or make the decisions that we don't really want to have to make to cut our scouting and our player development back. But I feel like we're at least in a position where we've once again got some decisions to make, and we've got money to potentially make those decisions, which is not the worst position in the world to be in. So going to spend some time offline investigating everyone who's available, but I feel right now the fact that we don't have Carrillo signed, we let some guys go, we signed some arbitration eligible players to a little less than they thought they were going to get. We've opened up a decent amount of money where we can potentially be, I don't want to say big time players this off season, but we can still be in action for anybody who's out there, particularly if we do make one of those difficult decisions I mentioned and try to deal a Bolig, which I don't think we will, but it still is at least conceptually on the table. But with Jenneret now, you can see those left-handed hitters, Heine and Bolig, are now our second and third best guys from last season in terms of home runs. Unfortunately for us, neither of them actually even reached 20 last year. But I do think, as I talked about at the top of the episode, they're both still pretty productive hitters against right-handed pitching. So with all the righty batters we've had coming up through the system, I think we can have a potentially platoon-heavy lineup next year that could still be pretty productive. So we've got Seifu locked up, which is a big thing. We're going to get compensatory pick if Carrillo ends up going somewhere, which is not nearly as big, but still positive. And we've still got options to think about a Carrillo or a Jenneret or a Colton Sims or somebody else. And as I mentioned, at first glance, just in terms of being very responsible with our spending, Eddie Mosley is intriguing to me. Only looking for a one-year deal. He does want a no-trade clause. I think I might try to sign him to like a 3-year deal with a couple of options. He's not the worst option for a fifth starter or, again, another lefty arm out of the bullpen who could start for us in a pinch. Wouldn't feel horrible if we brought him on board at that kind of money, but not going to make any rash decisions. I'm sure some of you will have thoughts for me on the universe of pitchers that's out there, the universe of batters that's out there, which direction we should go. We'll also just check in for the heck of it on our old friend James Wood, looking for $4 million, which is what we could have had him for this season with the option. So no bargain there, but also could bring him back if we wanted to. Quite honestly, if we did pivot where all of a sudden we think we're going to try to bring Jenneret back all of a sudden, and we did decide that we needed to trade away Bolig to make that work, Wood would be another left-handed bat we could have back. I don't think that's where I'm going to end up, but as I said, we've got options open to be in play for just about anybody. Clearly, Jenneret will be the biggest stretch for us, but we could do it if we wanted to. So it's going to be an interesting offseason, and we will start tackling free agency in earnest in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.